This is proposed ordinance 2019-0477, an ordinance which we had a lot of public comment on today, as well as in our committee, the Law and Justice Committee, earlier this week and a couple meetings ago. This ordinance would adopt recommendations from the Seattle University School of Law's Korematsu Center for Law and Equality report that researched leading practices on civil rights commissions in local jurisdictions throughout the United States. And I might add that the Korematsu Center did this for one of the best consulting fees that King County ever had the pleasure of experiencing. In addition to establishing an independent King County Human and Civil Rights Commission.
By that, Councilmember Gossett, do you mean it was no charge?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say, but I don't know if the audience picked up on it. The proposed ordinance would, A, authorize the commission to investigate and enforce county anti-discrimination ordinances and allow subpoena powers. B, authorize the commission to appoint an executive director and staff that report directly to the commission. And C, decommission the existing King County Civil Rights Commission and the Office of Civil Rights and transfer all of their activities to the newly established commission. The ordinance was voted out of committee without recommendation. That means that all the committee members did not feel comfortable with voting it out as it was originally presented, but they did vote it out so that we can discuss it on this afternoon. That vote was taken on yesterday, December 10th, in the Law and Justice Committee. Based on the discussions from the committee, Councilmember Dabowski and I would like to offer a striking amendment to address some of the concerns that members of the committee raised, other county council members that were not members of the committee, as well as the executive and his staff had been raising with us. Now I would like to turn it over, the discussion over to the central staff to brief members on the key elements of the striking committee. Striking amendment.
Would you move adoption?
I'm sorry. First, I'd like to move that we adopt proposed ordinance 2019-0477.
Thank you, Councilmember Gossett, for that overview of where we've come. And I'd like to turn it over now to Andrew Kim on our central staff, who has been facilitating the additional work with the executive and sponsors to reflect the concerns and requests of members outlined by Councilmember Gossett. There's a striking amendment. Andrew, would you tell us what it does?
Definitely. Andrew Kim with Council Central Staff. I am reading the last page, or second to the last page, page 103 of the striking amendment, which has the effect statement. So the striking amendment would do the following. It would add a new section, and that new section is the last section of the proposed ordinance, section 59, starting on page 101. And that last section would make the ordinance not effective until April 1st, 2021, and only if by that date the executive has transmitted a status report on the feasibility study, a feasibility study and recommendations establishing the Human and Civil Rights Commission, a motion approving the feasibility study, and a motion approving the feasibility study is passed by the council. The feasibility study should include some of these key items: summary and outcome of community engagement to evaluate the new commission as established by this ordinance, summary and outcome of community engagement to evaluate the county's list of protected classes and those recommended by the Korematsu report, feasibility assessment and recommendation on how the executive director and staff of the new commission should be integrated into King County government, and recommendations for resources necessary to support the activities of the new commission. The striking amendment would also add an additional duty of the commission to propose an ordinance to the council or recommend to the council update the county's list of protected class based on robust community and stakeholder engagement. It would also remove the requirement that the executive director and staff to the commission be employees of the council. It would keep the county's list of protected classes included in King County Code as is and make other technical corrections. That concludes my briefing.
All right,
Mr. Chair.
thank you, Andrew. Yes, Councilmember
I
Lambert.
just have a question for his last comment. It would take away, there was two charts. There was one chart, and then there was a second little chart that had several new classifications. That second chart is no longer in here, is that correct, what you
That's
just
correct.
said?
That's correct. There's, it would just be, it would leave the current King County Code as is.
That is very helpful, thank you.
And to clarify and maybe emphasize what I heard you convey, that my understanding of this is that it really commences a robust public process over the course of next year, led by the executive branch in partnership with our Equity and Social Justice Director, Visaskia Cockrell, who would be helpful, that we would consult with the CSAs and the community councils and other stakeholders, and that before the revised Civil Rights Commission would come into effect, the council would have an opportunity, would actually be required to affirmatively vote by motion to approve a report. Is that right?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
And with respect to the duty, structure, scope of the eventual Civil Rights Commission as revised, is it correct to say that those are all subject to further refinement and changes, that nothing in here is cast in stone, and that the process that's being set up provides an opportunity for the executive council and the community to make changes?
That's correct. So if the recommendations of this feasibility study is to make changes to the ordinance, there would need to be another proposed ordinance.
To amend this one.
To amend the proposed ordinance, correct.
Okay, that's helpful. Other members have questions or comments. Shannon Braddock is here and has been all morning on behalf of the Executive's Office. Shannon, can you confirm, is the Executive Office branch comfortable with this approach?
Yes, thank
Maybe.
you for working with us.
No, you got to say it on the record.
I think we, yeah.
Is this on? Hi. Shannon Braddock for the Executive's Office. Thank you so much. We really appreciate everybody taking their time this morning and staff to work on it with us as well, and we look forward to this work moving forward.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And if we can just take a pause here, Shannon is our lead contact with the executive branch. We've worked with her all year, and some of us and some of you have worked with her for many years, Councilmember McDermott. I'd ask you to join me in a round of applause and appreciation for her great work. No, she's not leaving, Councilmember. That's just general. That's just heartfelt appreciation for the work that she's done. All right, other questions on the striking amendment, Councilmember Lambert.
Thank you. Well, there was some concerning,
Mr. Chair,
let him go first.
Okay, Councilmember Dunn. Councilmember Lambert's going to defer to you.
Dunn or Lambert, sorry.
Councilmember Dunn,
Dunn.
go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quick, on the representation on the board, do we is something in the striker that provides that there's an unincorporated area representative on the board, or is that still not been included?
Councilmember Dunn, the changes with respect to the commission and how it will be comprised are not changed, but nothing is changed until the process to consider that goes forward. So what I would say is the answer to your question is it's unchanged, but there is an opportunity to look at all options going forward and to bring forward those changes before it becomes effective. So,
Okay, so it remains 10 individuals appointed by the executive, confirmed by the council, with an 11th member appointed by the general body, and then no specificity yet at this point about an unincorporated area representative. Is that accurate?
it's a little hard to hear you, but Mr. Kim was nodding generally yes. If your understanding reflects the words on the paper, then there's no change.
Okay, all right. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Councilmember Dunn. Councilmember Lambert.
Thank you. So first a clarifying question, and then when we're ready, I have comments. So when does this exactly take place? Is this take place as just a study? Because we just got this, and some of us actually wanted to eat and go to the bathroom. Does that mean that the status quo goes ahead until April 1st of 2021, and then it takes effect? Is that what this does?
So, Councilmember Lambert, so what this would do is it would hold the effective date of this ordinance till April 1st, 2021.
Okay.
But before that happens, certain things have to happen. One, they need to submit a status report of the feasibility study by August 14th. Or transmit it, I'm sorry, but the executive has to transmit that report. They also have to transmit a feasibility study by February 1st, 2021. And a motion approving that feasibility study has to be approved by the council.
Okay. So when you're ready for comments, I'm ready.
I think we're, let's move the striking amendment if you're ready, Councilmember Gossett.
Yes, I am. Mr. Chair, at this point, I would like to move striking amendment S1.
All right, we've talked about that. Any further questions on that? All in favor of S1, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Turning now to the underlying ordinance as amended, are there any further amendments? T1.
There's a title amendment, yep.
Councilmember Gossett, would you move T1?
I would like to move at this time amendment T1.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? T1 carries. All right, now turning to comments on the ordinance as amended, Councilmember Lambert.
Thank you. So I want to talk about process. We got this in committee. There were lots of concerns in committee. And then we voted it out without recommendation. And of course, that was yesterday. Today's today. And as you might have guessed at the 5-hour meeting, that we've been a little busy. This did not go to local government. This pertains to local government. And it did not go to the local government committee. That is not okay. So we are here. We got it, 35 minutes or 40 minutes ago? And I think you even commented, still hot. It talks about the United Nations information. I have no idea. I have not read the United Nations, whatever that United Nations document is. And so I'm establishing the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I have not read that. I know somebody that was on the board of that, but I have not read it. So I don't know if I want to ensure those principles because I don't know what they are. When you look at the people on 181 that are to be on the advisory committee, there is not one word about rural residents. This will impact the rural residents, mostly impact them, and yet they are not even listed. This will not go over well in the unincorporated areas. I'm glad that we took out the expanded classes. When I called the state and asked them about what we were doing, they were like, why do you need that? And I'm like, well, that's a good question. We need to evaluate. Luckily, we'll now have 15 months to evaluate the workload. Workload last year was 4 cases. We saw so many numbers. The numbers went from 500,000 to 5.8 million. If I'm going to spend 5.8 million, it's going to be for the courts to keep this open. Whatever the number is. I don't know what the number is because we've seen so many. And also, I was very impressed with the integrity of the commission who's currently working on this, talking about the concerns that they have and how we need to address it. Who better than the current people doing it to be able to advise us? And I made a whole list, which is on my desk upstairs, and I can't find it right now, but a whole list of very pertinent, important comments that they made, well articulated, about, yes, we need to do some things, but here are the concerns. But instead, we're rushing something through, and I think that when we do go forward next year, that this should be dual referred to the local government committee, since the local government people will be impacted, and they should have a say. And I'm very sad that there wasn't one person when I made calls last night that even knew this was happening. So I am concerned about the process for sure. Thank you.
Councilmember Lambert, thank you for sharing those views. That is the first time I've had a request on this legislation to refer it to the local government committee. We referred it to the Law Justice Committee, and had I heard that request before, that would have been something I certainly would have come for. But we are, in addition to the local government, a regional government, and you do serve, I think, on the Law Justice Committee, right? So I hear what you're saying there. One of the things that I requested in the striking amendment with respect to the public process is that we specifically consult with the CSAs, which used to be called the UACs, to make sure we get that input. That was in a direct response to Councilmember Dunn's request and yours for enhanced and serious and rigorous consultation with the unincorporated area residents.
And I really appreciate that, Councilmember Reagan.
Trying.
And I appreciate it totally. You know, we haven't in the past, until last year, had a Department of Local Services, and so it was easy to ignore them. But now that we have that, thank God, you know, we just have to be thinking about, does this apply to them more than anybody else? And if so, it needs to go to them. But being left out on something this serious and with subpoena powers and all kinds of other powers is something serious that they actually need to have some input on. So thank you very much for doing that.
I appreciate that. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Councilmember Dunn.
thank you for recognizing. I'm assuming we're on final pass, something close, so I'm just going to say my two bits about this. You know, I just want to make sure we're separating out policy from personalities. I know this is potentially Councilmember Gossett's last meeting. I just adore Councilmember Gossett. I love the way he fights for civil rights, fights for fairness, dignity of all people, and I respect him on this. I'm not going to reach the substance of the actual underlying ordinance much here. I just want to talk about the process. It's obvious we're rushing this thing through because it's Larry Gossett's last meeting. I understand that. That's a compelling reason. But it doesn't make for very good public policy development, to be candid. This is not a lightweight ordinance. It's a very significant and very important new enforcement regime that will support the civil rights laws I voted on, laws that I supported. But what it does is it enforces in the unincorporated area. That is where the county has local jurisdiction. And what it doesn't do is put a unincorporated area representative. It's got a lot of activists, civil rights experts, and sort of thing on there, but it doesn't have people on it, at least specified at this point in time, under whom this will govern in effect. And it passed out of committee yesterday without recommendation. Less than 24 hours later, we start this committee. Just a few minutes ago, we get this striker handed out. That is public, or very, very poor public process. Actually, it's the worst public process I've seen ever in any ordinance in the council. That said, just because we're having post-facto hearings on this, we have still taken action council signaling what we are going to do, what is going to become law, and that is not inviting public process. That is not taking their input. That is force-feeding the public on what we are going to do, and it's a pretext for public process, and it's for public process. So I want you to know, unfortunately, you're going to see the unincorporated areas really concerned about this, and instead of having an easy process, if you wait 30 or 60 days to fine-tune it, the process will be much more difficult to get community buy-in. If you don't get community buy-in on something that's important, it doesn't have legitimacy. And so for that reason alone, I'm going to be opposing this, and I'm very, very concerned about the direction that has gone, and I would urge my colleagues to oppose it at this moment. And thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Dunn. Other comments? Councilmember McDermott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad this legislation is before us today because we need a strong Human and Civil Rights Commission, and unfortunately, we don't have that to the full strength that we should in King County today. And this establishes the builds on the good work of the Law and Justice Committee and goes out and does some public engagement that we've heard an interest in, and sets us in a strong position to have a strong, effective engaging Civil Rights Commission, Human and Civil Rights Commission, that I know that the county as a whole will value and benefit from, and particularly White Center and Vashon, the unincorporated areas of my district, both urban and rural, will be strong supporters of this and benefit from it. I'm glad it's before us today.
Thank you, Councilmember McDermott. Councilmember Balducci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure, but I might be the only one here who has actually appeared in front of the King County Civil Rights Commission in my career, back when I worked in the executive branch quite a few years ago when it was a very active body, and also the Personnel Board, just saying. And at that time, when the Civil Rights Commission was active, they engaged in policy discussions and review of complaints. It's not a body that can take on, frankly, a whole lot of stuff all at one time. I mean, I don't want to get expectations super high about what any one body is going to be able to do. They will do good things, but they're going to have to be strategic about their time, because as a volunteer body that probably meets something like once a month, there's only so much they can do. And at that time, I thought they were very valuable. They've been moribund or to defunct in recent years, and so I support the idea of making sure that we have a renewed and appropriately independent Civil Rights Commission. I really want to thank the sponsors for including the delay in implementation so that we can do some additional public outreach. I think that my colleagues, Councilmember Lambert and Councilmember Dunn, raised some good points, and we really need to make sure that we're connecting with the folks that are going to be most affected by this body, because it's not the incorporated areas that will be the most affected. So on balance, I think it's good that today's action shows our absolute commitment to having an independent and effective Civil Rights and Human Rights Commission, but the delay in the implementation date and the additional public process allows us to make sure that it is set up to function well, people understand what it's doing, and that it's meeting the intended goal. So I will vote yes on this, and I thank you for the work, Councilmembers Gossett and Demowski.
Thank you, Councilmember Balducci. Other comments? Before Councilmember Gossett closes, I want to say that, first of all, it's been a personal privilege to get to be a co-sponsor with you on this piece of legislation, and that I believe it will be the final vote, Councilmember Gossett, you will take as a member of this body. And it's an important piece of legislation. It returns to your roots and centers you on all that you've done in your course of public service, and that is to look out for folks and their basic human dignity, reflected here in civil rights law, human rights principles. And I think it's fitting and appropriate that we advance this today. I also think it is fitting and appropriate in the way it's being advanced. You care about this process and people with differing views, and you are dedicated, in what I've seen, dedicated to making sure that nobody's views are drowned out. And when voices were raised saying this is going a little quick, we need to take a little look at it, you said, you bet, let's slow it down. And so this amendment, which gives it a little more time and a lot more process, and good faith process that will ensure that we can make changes that the community asks for, that experts suggest. It's real, it's not pretend, is also a tribute to you and consistent with the person you are. So I appreciate the concerns that have been raised, how they've been raised, and the approach I think that we're taking to kind of resolve them, and I'm happy to support it today. Councilmember Gossett to close.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and other honorable council members who are present. I believe this will indeed be the last ordinance that I will be able to recommend to you, and at least I will be voting to support it, and I have a sense that many of you will be too. When I first came to the county council, I was coming from being the executive director of an anti-poverty agency called the Central Area Motivation program. And I was there about 15 years. And mostly our population of poor people in the inner city of Seattle was about 80%. Tony Orange is here. He followed me as one of the executive directors and was very involved there too. But I think the population that we served about 80% African American. So the overwhelming majority of the public policies that we tried to influence, it was clear to us that there was a right side and a wrong side. There was justice and injustice, and I didn't get a lot of opportunities on the public policies that we organized around to even think about the views of the powers that be or others. However, when I got down to the county council and garnered a deeper appreciation for what it is that politicians do in the kind of democracy that we have here locally and nationally, I really have come to understand that public policy making is the art of compromise. And I'm kind of pleased that we were able, even on this last piece of legislation, I wanted it last week to just pass out, but at the committee, I saw that that was not going to be the case. I worked it with my colleagues, many of you, our staff, particularly Rod and my staff, really worked hard at trying to figure out a way. Cindy Domingo led the effort from my staff on this issue, find a way that we could have a compromise with other council members as well as, and that's why I was glad that Shannon spoke a little earlier, as well as with the executive. And as you all can see, we worked out a little something that will mean that a lot more democracy will hopefully take place over the next 14 months. A lot of more people will have input into the establishment of the King County Civil and Human Rights Commission. And I'm very confident, given my involvement with a wide range of issues and ordinances in the past 25 years here, that it will more likely than not be made much better than it would be if we start implementing it next week. And that is why I'm pleased that the chair has given me the opportunity to thank everybody involved in this ordinance, but also to thank everybody that has been so supportive of me and our office, District 2, over these 25 years. I'd like to think I was a pretty good politician. They helped get a lot of things done, and that the things that we got done here in King County have made a difference in the lives of everyday people every day. And to the extent that that has been the case, I am really proud and privileged to have been, for a quarter century, Mr. Chair, a member of the Martin Luther King Jr. County Council. And when I looked out, I saw my wife, Rhonda Gossett, smiling. And Tillery, this is for the chair. And then next to her is Brian Derdowski, who our chair this year, Brian.
Stand up, Councilmember Derdowski. I want people to see the difference here.
Yeah.
No, he is taller. He's taller. And he wears better ties.
Carmen, this guy was the very first Polish background person that worked on the county council. And when he first started, he said, well, I don't know about going to MLK celebration. My dad told me that this cat was a communist or something. But when he left, Carver, when he left, he was standing right beside me leading demonstrations against the meeting of the World Trade Organization in '99 here in Seattle. So change is possible, y'all. I'm telling you. And I just have been very proud for having the opportunity to be a part of it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Gossett. With that, the clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Balducci. Councilmember Dunn.
No.
Councilmember Gossett.
Aye.
Councilmember Colwells. Councilmember Lambert. No. Councilmember McDermott.
Aye.
Councilmember Up the Grove.
Aye.
Councilmember Von Reitbauer. Mr. Chair.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the vote is 6 ayes. Councilmembers Dunn and Lambert voting no, and Councilmember Von Reitbauer excused.
All right, ordinance 2019-0477 as amended, establishing the King County Human and Civil Rights Commission and making other changes is adopted.